The notification ping from my banking app came at 2:47 a.m., 3 days after what I'd thought was the best family reunion we'd had in years. I should have been asleep, but jet lag from the cross-country flight back to Seattle had me wide awake, scrolling through photos from the weekend. Pictures of my dad teaching my 8-year-old niece how to skip stones. My stepmother Maria laughing at my terrible jokes. My half-brother Jake actually putting his phone down long enough to have a real conversation. For the first time since my mother's death 5 years ago, it felt like we were a family again. The banking notification was routine, just a balance alert I'd set up months ago. But when I opened it, my blood turned to ice water. Account balance, $847.23. 3 days ago, before I'd flown to Colorado for the reunion, that account had held $47,000. My entire life savings. Every penny I'd scraped together working double shifts as an ER nurse, living in a studio apartment, driving a 15-year-old Honda, eating ramen more nights than I cared to admit. It was my down payment fund, my ticket to finally buying a house, to having something that was truly mine. With shaking fingers, I pulled up the transaction history. There it was, bold as daylight. A withdrawal for $46,152.77 on Saturday morning at 9:23 a.m. The same Saturday I'd been helping Maria set up for the barbecue, laughing as we hung string lights around the back patio. The withdrawal location made my stomach drop. First National Bank, Durango, Colorado. The branch 3 blocks from Dad's house. My hands shook as I called the bank's fraud line. The automated system was maddeningly cheerful, cycling through menu options while my world crumbled around me. Finally, a human voice. "This is Janet with Fraud Protection. How can I help you?" "Someone stole $46,000 from my account," I whispered, my voice barely working. After 20 minutes of identity verification and security questions, Janet delivered the news I'd been dreading. "Ma'am, I see the withdrawal was made with your debit card and PIN at 9:23 a.m. on Saturday. No signs of fraud in our system." "That's impossible. I was in Colorado, but I never made that withdrawal." "The transaction shows it was completed with a valid card and PIN. Do you have your card with you now?" I grabbed my wallet with numb fingers. My debit card sat in its usual slot, looking perfectly normal. "Yes, it's right here." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but without evidence of unauthorized use, there's not much we can do. You'll need to file a police report if you believe the funds were stolen." The call ended, leaving me staring at my phone in the blue glow of my laptop screen. My mind raced, trying to piece together what had happened. The only people who knew my PIN were nobody. I was obsessive about financial security. I never wrote it down, never shared it. Except. The memory hit me like a physical blow. Last Christmas, when Dad was in the hospital after his heart attack, I'd been managing his bills, helping Maria navigate the insurance maze. One afternoon, exhausted and overwhelmed, I'd used the hospital ATM to get cash for parking. Dad had been right there, still groggy from medication, when I'd punched in my PIN. "Same as your mom's birthday," he'd mumbled with a weak smile. "You always were sentimental." My mother's birthday, 0816, August 16th. At the time, I'd been touched that he remembered, even in his medicated haze. Now, the memory made me sick. I sat frozen on my couch until sunrise, then called in sick to work. The first time in 3 years. By 9 a.m., I was on the phone with Dad. "Sarah, good morning, sweetheart. How was your flight back?" His voice was warm, cheerful, normal. If I hadn't seen the bank records with my own eyes, I never would have suspected. "Dad, I need to ask you something." I tried to keep my voice steady. Did you take money from my account while I was there?" The pause stretched too long. When he spoke again, his tone had shifted, becoming defensive. "What are you talking about?" $46,000 was withdrawn from my savings account on Saturday morning, in Durango. Another pause. Then, Sarah, honey, I think there might be some confusion. Dad, please, just tell me the truth. The mask slipped. His voice turned hard, a tone I remembered from childhood arguments. We needed it, Sarah. The house is going into foreclosure. Maria's medical bills from her surgery are killing us. Jake needs money for college. The casual way he said it, like he was explaining why he'd borrowed my car, made everything worse. That was my money, Dad. My life savings. I was going to buy a house. He snorted. The sound came through the phone like a slap. You're 28 years old living in a studio apartment. What do you need a house for? We're family. Family helps family. By stealing? The word came out sharper than I'd intended. It's not stealing when it's family. Your mother always said we should take care of each other. Don't be selfish, Sarah. The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. The father who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd held me while I cried after my first heartbreak, who'd raised me to believe in fairness and honesty, that man had just stolen my future and called me selfish for objecting. The next few days passed in a haze. I went through the motions at work, but my mind was elsewhere, churning through options. The police report was filed, but as expected, it went nowhere. The bank maintained their position. Valid card, valid PIN, no fraud. My money was gone. I called a lawyer who gave me the hard truth over the phone. Technically, this is theft, but proving it will be difficult and expensive. You'd need to establish that you never gave permission for the withdrawal, and with him being family and having access to your PIN, it becomes a he said, she said, all situation. Civil court might be an option, but that could take years and cost more than you might recover. 3 weeks passed. Dad called twice, leaving voicemails that I deleted without listening to. Maria sent a text. Your father is hurt that you haven't called back. Family is forever, Misha. Family is forever. The words echoed in my head as I sat in my studio apartment, eating another dinner of instant noodles, looking at real estate listings I could no longer afford. They'd stolen my money and now wanted me to pretend nothing had happened. That's when I started planning. The idea came to me during a particularly brutal shift in the ER. We'd had 3 overdoses, 2 domestic violence cases, and a car accident that ended with me holding the hand of a woman who wouldn't make it to morning. Life was fragile, precious, and some people took advantage of that. My father had raised me to believe in consequences. Actions have reactions, Sarah. He used to say when I was little and had done something wrong. You can't just take what isn't yours and expect nothing to happen. Fine. Let's see how he liked his own medicine. I started with research. Public records showed that Dad and Maria's house had indeed received a foreclosure notice, dated 2 weeks after the family reunion. So the financial crisis was real, but it had come after he'd taken my money, not before. He'd lied about the desperation, made it seem like an emergency when it was just opportunity. Their mortgage was held by Mountain West Bank. A few phone calls, pretending to be a concerned daughter looking into refinancing options for my parents, gave me the information I needed. They owed $89,000 on a house worth maybe $110,000 in the current market. The foreclosure was proceeding because they'd missed 4 months of payments. But here's what Dad hadn't counted on. I knew where the money was. During the reunion, Jake had been bragging about getting into Colorado State University. Dad's paying for everything, he'd said with the casual entitlement of a 19-year-old who'd never worked for anything. Full ride, plus a car and an apartment. Maria had shown me photos on her phone of the new kitchen renovation they were planning. Your father surprised me with the budget for it, she'd said, beaming. We can finally get those granite countertops I've always wanted. The money wasn't gone, it was just redistributed. To people who'd convinced themselves they deserved it more than I did. I took a week off work and drove to Colorado. Told Dad I was coming for a visit, that I'd had time to think, and wanted to talk things through as a family. He sounded relieved on the phone. "I knew you'd come around, sweetheart. Your mom raised you right." The house looked exactly the same from the outside, but I could see the signs of new money everywhere once I stepped inside. Fresh paint, new furniture, a massive flat-screen TV dominating the living room. Maria showed off the kitchen contractors' preliminary sketches like she was displaying artwork. "Isn't it exciting?" she gushed. "We'll finally have the kitchen we've always dreamed of." I smiled and nodded and played the part of the reconciled daughter while taking careful note of everything. The new laptop Jake was using for college applications, a top-of-the-line MacBook Pro, the stack of CSU enrollment paperwork on the dining table, including a receipt for his paid-in-full first semester tuition. The granite samples Maria had spread across the coffee table like Christmas presents. That evening, after dinner, Dad pulled me aside on the back porch. The string lights were still up from the reunion, casting warm shadows across his face. "I'm glad you're here, Sarah. I was starting to worry you'd stay mad forever." "I was hurt," I said carefully. "But you're right. We're family." He relaxed, the tension leaving his shoulders. "Your mother always said you had her forgiving heart." I let him think that for 2 more days, let them all think I'd accepted the new reality, that I'd decided to be the bigger person. Jake even thanked me for understanding about his college situation. Maria hugged me and said I was growing into such a wise young woman. On my last night, I volunteered to make dinner for everyone, a gesture of goodwill, I said. While they sat in the living room watching TV, I got to work in the kitchen, and I made my own withdrawals. It started small. $20 bills from Maria's purse, Dad's collection of silver dollars from the desk drawer in his office, coins he'd been collecting since I was a child, worth far more than their face value now. Jake's expensive gaming headphones disappeared from his room. The bottle of whiskey Dad had been saving for special occasions vanished from the liquor cabinet. But those were just appetizers. The next morning, while they slept, I accessed Dad's computer. He'd always been terrible with digital security, using the same password for everything, Patricia0816, my mother's name and birth date, his email, his bank accounts, his investment portfolio, everything. I didn't take the money back. That would have been too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I did something much more elegant. I canceled Jake's enrollment at CSU, requesting a full refund to be sent to the account Dad had paid from. The refund policy allowed for full recovery of tuition within 30 days of payment, minus a small administrative fee. Jake would lose his spot, but the money would be returned. I canceled the kitchen renovation, citing family financial concerns in an email to the contractor. The deposit they'd paid would be forfeit, but it would stop the larger expense from going through. I changed the passwords on Dad's investment accounts and set up new security questions using information only I would know. Details about my mother that Dad had shared with me over the years, but never talked about with Maria or Jake. And then I waited. The calls started 2 days after I got back to Seattle. First Maria, crying and confused. "The contractor says we canceled the kitchen project, but we never called them, and they're keeping our deposit." Then Jake, panicked and angry. "CSU says I'm not enrolled anymore. They said someone canceled my registration. Dad, you have to fix this." Finally, Dad himself, his voice tight with fury. "Sarah, what did you do?" "I don't know what you mean, Dad." "My investment accounts are locked. Jake's college enrollment is gone. The kitchen renovation is canceled. This started right after you left." "That sounds terrible. Maybe you should call the police." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was dangerous. "You're playing a very stupid game, little girl." "I learned from the best, Dad." Actions have reactions, right? Over the next week, the calls became more frequent and more desperate. Dad couldn't access his investment accounts, which held another $30,000, money he'd planned to use for the house payments and other expenses. Jake had lost his spot at CSU and would have to wait until the next semester to reapply, assuming he could get accepted again. The kitchen contractor had not only kept their deposit but was threatening to sue for breach of contract. But I wasn't done. I'd kept copies of all Dad's financial information: bank statements, investment records, tax documents, everything I'd accessed while helping him during his hospital stay. Perfectly legal for me to have, since he'd given me power of attorney at the time. A few anonymous tips to the IRS about potentially unreported income led to an audit. Nothing illegal. Dad wasn't a tax cheat. But the process would tie up his finances for months. A call to Mountain West Bank, identifying myself as Patricia Morrison's daughter and expressing concerns about potential elder fraud involving my father's accounts, triggered a fraud investigation that froze his assets pending review. Each move was calculated, legal, and devastating. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Dad showed up at my apartment building at 6 a.m., pounding on my door hard enough to wake the neighbors. When I opened it, he looked like he'd aged 10 years. "Enough," he said, pushing past me into my tiny studio. "This ends now." "I don't know what you're talking about." He spun to face me, his face flushed with rage. "You think you're so smart? You think you can destroy your family and get away with it?" "I think someone taught me that family helps family," I said calmly, "and that actions have consequences. That money saved our house. Jake's entire future depended on that college enrollment. And my entire future depended on my savings account. Funny how that works." Dad stepped closer, his hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might actually hit me, something he'd never done, even when I was at my most rebellious as a teenager. "Your mother would be ashamed of you," he said instead. The words hit harder than any physical blow could have, but I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks. "My mother taught me to stand up for myself," I said quietly. "She taught me that being family doesn't give you the right to hurt people, and she taught me that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who hurt you most." Dad's face crumpled. The anger drained out of him, leaving behind something broken and tired. "Sarah, please. The house. We're going to lose everything." "You already lost everything, Dad. You lost it the moment you decided to steal from me and call it love." He stood there for a long moment, shoulders sagging. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "What do you want?" "I want my money back. Every penny. And I want Jake to apologize for spending money he knew wasn't his. And I want Maria to admit she knew where that kitchen renovation money came from. And if we do that, you'll undo whatever you've done?" I looked at my father. This man who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd held me during thunderstorms, who'd walked me down the aisle at my wedding that never happened because my fiancé turned out to be as untrustworthy as his daughter's family, and felt something inside me settle into place. "No," I said, "because this isn't about the money anymore, Dad. This is about the fact that you looked me in the eye and stole my future, then called me selfish for objecting. This is about the fact that you raised me to believe in fairness and honesty, then showed me those were just words." His face went white. "Sarah, the money will be returned because you'll sell the house and liquidate the investments to pay me back. Jake will reapply to college and pay his own way, like millions of other students do. Maria will get her kitchen renovation when you can actually afford it, not when you can steal it. We can't sell the house. Where would we live? You'll figure it out. Your family, right? Family helps family." Dad left without another word. I watched from my window as he sat in his truck in my parking lot for 20 minutes, just staring at nothing, before finally driving away. The resolution took 3 months. The house sold for $108,000 after paying off the mortgage and realtor fees, leaving them with about $15,000. Dad's investments, once I restored his access, held another $28,000. Together with Jake's tuition refund, they managed to scrape together $47,000, exactly what they'd stolen, minus the interest I'd have earned. The check arrived with no note, no apology, no explanation. Just my money, returned through a lawyer to avoid any direct contact. I deposited it immediately and started house hunting again. 6 months later, I bought a small 2-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle. It had a big backyard, perfect for the garden I'd always wanted, and a front porch where I could drink my morning coffee and watch the sunrise. Dad called once, 3 days after I moved in. Maria must have seen the real estate announcement I'd posted on social media. "Sarah? It's Dad." I almost hung up. Instead, I said, "What do you want?" I wanted to. I wanted to congratulate you on the house. It looks beautiful." "Thank you." A long pause. Then, "I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm proud of you. For fighting back. For not letting us get away with it." The words caught me off guard. "Dad, your mother really would have been proud. Not of what we did, but of how you handled it. She always said you were stronger than you knew." I closed my eyes, feeling tears I'd been holding back for months finally start to fall. "You broke my heart, Dad. Not just by taking the money, but by acting like I was wrong to want it back. I know, and I'm sorry. I was desperate and scared, and I convinced myself that family meant you'd understand, that you'd forgive us anything. But that's not what family means, is it? It's not." Another pause. "Jake's working 2 jobs to save for college. He says he understands now why you were so angry. Maria's been seeing a therapist about boundaries and taking responsibility." I didn't know what to say to that. "I know we can't go back," Dad continued. "I know I can't undo what I did or how I treated you afterward. But I want you to know that every day I wish I could." "I wish you could too, Dad." We sat in silence for a while, 2 people who'd once loved each other unconditionally, now separated by a betrayal that had changed us both. "Would you—" he started, then stopped. "Would you maybe, if we worked really hard, if we proved that we learned something from this, would there be a chance for us to be family again someday?" I looked around my new house. My house, bought with my money, earned through my work and sacrifice and determination. In the evening light streaming through the kitchen window, it felt like sanctuary. "I don't know, Dad," I said honestly, "but I'm willing to see what happens." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a happy ending where everyone hugged and learned valuable lessons about the true meaning of family. But it was a beginning. A small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart, just wide enough to let in the possibility that someday, maybe, we might find our way back to each other. Or maybe we wouldn't. Maybe some betrayals cut too deep, leave scars too visible, break trust too completely to ever fully heal. But sitting in my kitchen, in my house, with my money safely in my account, and my future finally back in my own hands, I realized that was okay too. I'd learned something valuable from this whole nightmare. I didn't need my family's approval or understanding or love to build a good life. I didn't need their definition of what family meant, or their version of loyalty that only went one way. I just needed to be true to myself, to stand up for what was right, and to never again let anyone, family or otherwise, make me feel selfish for protecting what was mine. The house settled around me as night fell, creaking and sighing like houses do when they're becoming home. Tomorrow, I'd plant flowers in the backyard. Next week, I'd paint the guest bedroom. Next month, I'd invite friends over for dinner. Real friends, who understood that love didn't come with a price tag and loyalty wasn't measured in bank account access. And if Dad really meant what he'd said about learning and growing and earning back trust, well, he knew where to find me. I'd be right here, in my house, building the life I'd always dreamed of. On my terms this time. With my money, my rules, and my definition of what family should really mean. The phone rang again, but I let it go to voicemail. Whatever crisis or drama or family emergency it was, I'd handle it tomorrow. Tonight was for me, for celebrating not just the house I'd bought, but the person I'd become in the process of fighting for it. Strong, independent, unbreakable, and finally, home.